Welcome to another One Moon interview. I'm Andre, and I'm here with a very good friend of mine, Swil Kanim. We go way back, a few years. I just want to start with telling the story of how I met you. So it's 1991, and I had just moved to the Pike Place Market. And it was very exciting, and lots of street musicians, and a fun place to live. And one day I heard this very cutting through all the sound of the market, this lone sound just kind of rising above, like an eagle. And it was a violin. And then I looked down beyond the fish market, and there's this Native American guy with long hair playing in this stairwell with this beautiful echo of the violin. And you could hear it like for quite a ways, you know. And I forget, I probably came up and said hello or something, but that's how we met. Yeah.
I don't remember that. I mean, but what I do remember is the friendship that eventually developed. Just because it may not have been the first time, but the second time or the third time. One of the times was up by the Post Alley area, by the Starbucks, or Seattle's Best Coffee. It was right there. And I remember you coming down, and by that time I had known that you were a musician too, and it just felt like such an honor to be listened to by a musician, right? And I think I didn't even have my pretty sure I didn't have my Indian name then. I was Richard Marshall, right? I mean, that was on my CD or tape recorder or whatever.
Yeah.
And I just remember that feeling. And then there was a poetry reading that you invited me to play at.
Actually, no. It was a concert that I set up for you and I.
Oh.
Yeah. In a little gallery.
Yes.
And it was a late concert. I remember it was like a starting at midnight kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there's poetry involved, but it was just you and I. Yeah.
That was the first time I was paid not to play on the streets.
You've mentioned that before.
That was my very first paid gig where I played my music, and it was a beautiful beginning. Because when I was playing on the street, people were just walking by. They had places to go. You know, if it was their lunch hour, they had a certain amount of time.
Right.
And I mean, if I got them to stop and listen, that was such a big, huge thing, right?
It's true, yeah.
But in this environment, everyone was there to hear me play.
Yeah.
And totally different relationship with my audience.
Yeah.
Right?
It makes a big difference. And there are some musicians that aren't used to that, and they kind of have a hard time with the silence. So I've experienced that with some musicians too. It's like almost too much focus just on them, you know?
Right. Yeah. I enjoyed it. What I enjoy is that because when I get into playing, I'll close my eyes and I'll listen to everything that's going around me. And almost then I was like, I could hear them breathing, the audience breathing right along with me in the music. And that was like, oh, I could enjoy this. I could enjoy that experience.
That's how it should be.
Yeah.
So I think what also attracted me to your music is that it was original music.
Yeah.
And I was doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. I was just transitioning from being this guy from Italy who played classical music. And suddenly during that time, I started shifting to writing all original songs. And it wasn't something I decided to do, it was just happening, you know.
Yeah. And that's interesting because for me, I was relearning how to play.
Right.
Because when I stopped playing when I was in the Army,
Yeah.
and I didn't have the books that I had before, but I remembered certain things.
Yeah.
And so I was creating new music at the edge of my ability.
Right.
I mean, there's a progression to my compositions that
Right.
were continually pushing me back to my, full double stop, full, scaled, full arpeggio type, classical training.
That leads me to one of my questions. I'd like to know. I know the story because for your stories in the public school, and you wanted to play the violin. Really wanted to play the violin.
Right.
So I'd like to know, like, where were you? How old were you? And what did your life look like back then once you got into playing the violin? Was it classical music? Were you going to
You mean after I stopped when I was in the Army?
No. When you were young, I want to know a young Richard. I want people to picture a young you starting to play music.
There's a story I don't tell very often, and it's a true story. I didn't have a peaceful relationship with my adoptive mom.
Yeah.
It was a violent relationship. And, but I remember one moment where she was crying. Her soap opera is very interrupted, but she was crying because of the news. There was a news flash that came on, and I was like, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "Louis Armstrong passed away."
Oh wow.
And
yeah.
And I said, "So who's Louis Armstrong?" And she said, "He was a musician."
Yeah.
And I thought, I've got to be that. That's what it stops to, if that's what it takes to soften her heart.
Right.
I've got to really be that.
Yeah. You were 10.
Yeah.
11,
Yeah.
something like that.
Almost. I think I was 10. I think it was around that time.
Yeah.
I don't know what year he passed away, but but the point is that I became hyper vigilant around the notion of being a musician.
Yeah.
I was looking for an opportunity to be a musician.
And you hadn't started playing yet.
I hadn't started playing yet.
Yeah.
I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. And I think my only exposure to an instrument before that was my grandpa's harmonica, my adoptive grandpa's harmonica.
Yeah.
I was making too much noise and running around the house, and he said, "Here, take this outside and play."
Yeah.
And it was a way to get rid of me, and I went outside and I played underneath a tree, and the neighbor gal heard me playing and wanted to come out and play, and we played together. And but so the harmonica I saw, or the music that I saw, was a way to create connection with people, and I still see it as that. One thing I know is the violin is a tool to create connection. And that's the motive behind all of my music. Is creating connection with my audience, creating connection from my story to another story. And I really believe that, from the very beginning, like with this whole Louis Armstrong connection, through music, he was able to connect to this parental figure of mine that was violent and softened her heart. Maybe I could soften the heart of people around me. So it was a defense mechanism. It was a strategy built in me. So my skill set, or my gift, is in the desire for connection. And the strategy is the violin. And later on, storytelling, acting. But somehow, everything I've been doing, even that exchange between you and me, at the Pike Place Market, that exchange was very important to me, because here this real musician, that's what I saw you as, was a real musician, was connecting to my best efforts. And it gave me confidence, right? It changed the story I had in my head about my worthiness, and to confide, which is the root of confidence.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
to confide in myself, to create self-confidence.
Well, for what it's worth, your music was already a beautiful natural thing, just like a flower or a tree, and it had its own power. And I didn't see it as more or less than a real musician or not. It was just a beautiful, amazing voice, you know?
Well, and in fact, that whole story about what real is, because it's like, I would call you a real musician. And that is not a put down. That's not a categorization. It's actually, if you look at the meaning of the word realistic, it means true to life. As in a realistic painting is true to life. So a real musician is true to life. It's an important thing. It's not so pie in the sky that most people think. Well, you better have a backup plan, right? And it's like, no, I'm going to be true to life. I'm going to be who I really am. And I hope this conversation inspires the listener to this conversation to realize that there's nothing more powerful than being an artist.
Being true to yourself.
Right.
And you don't find that certain something that is your gift, that's a unique gift that only you can give to the world, unless you spend some time looking for it, and unless you have an intention to really do it. And the beautiful thing about that is being open to it. You don't have to make a decision. It's already being made for you. So, speaking of words and how you're breaking down words there, works for the people. What does that mean?
First off, I intuitively chose that as the title of my album, right? I had no idea that my, a translation or of my Indian name would be pulls, like works, canoeing, pulling, works for the people.
Oh, you didn't know that ahead of time?
I didn't know that ahead of time.
So Swil Kanim.
Swil Kanim is a reflection of that. And I dedicated the piece to my elders and ancestors.
Right.
Because I believe my relationship to my ancestry as a native, as a Lummi man, my relationship to my mom, to my dad, to my grandparents, to all my aunts and uncles, my relationship to them was what I longed for as a foster kid. It's what I longed for. So, and while I was playing the violin, I thought, as a kid, when I was practicing the violin, I thought, if I become the world's best violinist, my real family will find me again, right? It was a very important drive to it. So not only I had the fear of being hit, and I had the positive drive of connecting with my family again. Again, the strategy of connection was there. That all is what it means. That drive from that to this was the work. And it was for the people. It was because it was my connection to that.
And you wouldn't have found that if you wouldn't have been persistent when you were introduced to the violin in school.
Right.
And
resilient, I prefer. I don't know if I was persistent. I was more resilient.
And you had a teacher.
Oh, I had brilliant teachers.
Quickly tell the story of the teacher that allowed you to, because your parents didn't want you to play.
Right. Yeah. My fourth grade teacher, Kathy Dorr. When I introduce her to my friends, I say, "This is Kathy Dorr, my fourth grade teacher, my hero." And it wasn't just about the violin. It was about my self-expression. She encouraged my full self-expression in my storytelling, kids called me a liar on the playground, and she said, no, he's not a liar, he's a storyteller with a vivid imagination. And that was the coolest thing too, because it relieved all that tension, right?
Yeah.
And so I was a storyteller with a vivid imagination, and I needed to tell those sort of stories for other dark reasons, to survive, right? That was an important part of me. And she saw that, and she saw that I needed to walk around the room when I was reading. And I just, it didn't, it was before ADHD type diagnosis was available, but she saw that I was keep my nose into the book if I had the distraction of walking around the room while I was reading. Ramona the Pest. I love Beverly Cleary, and she just passed, and so I'm reminded of that right now. But I am so thankful for the humor, the story, the structure of all of that, because all of that whole notion of Kathy Dorr being my hero, being present to the storyteller in me, being present to my musician, and forging the parent permission slip, which allowed me to play my violin, the school violin at school. And then, after school, I would go to my best friend's house and play his violin, and we would actually practice. Eventually, they had to come to a concert, and they found out I was playing the violin and that I was first chair, and that I was being protected, by my friends. And it was a beautiful exchange. It got me going. Definitely.
And how did they adapt to that once they saw that it was in flight?
Well, they didn't believe Indians could play the violin. They thought that I should play the drums or something primitive. And
this is
once I started,
in Bellingham.
And once I started playing, and they would never say it to anybody else. They just say it to me. You could play the violin. We know that you're going to quit, right? So you're putting a lot of effort into this, but you're an Indian, so you're going to quit.
Right.
And so they were trying to give me a soft landing somewhere else within their stereotype of who I was. Of course, with my adoptive father, the deathbed conversation was completely gracious and kind, and asking for forgiveness and love, and I was asking for the same before it was all over. And the truth is, I believe everybody deep down does their best. They try to do their best. And
I think the older I get, I feel like we just have to be forgiving. And
it's the only way to be generous. With our skills and talents.
Otherwise, you end up with weights that you shouldn't carry.
Exactly.
To be free and light, you just have to be forgiving. Exactly. Well, you have so many beautiful stories, and I want to, in the next segment where you're playing, and I'd like you to do a story for us or present a story for us. So, kind of fast forwarding to now, how have you navigated the pandemic?
Got the shot. I'm a couple shots. I'm good. I'm very happy about that. I've come to this understanding that I believe the only way we're going to get to the other side of this is that we're going to have to see the value of faith, hope, and love. I believe that there are people, and this is my faith, there are people that are actually smarter than me. And I put my faith in those people. And I hope, hope is the desire of an outcome, right? So I have hope that the desire to get to the other side of this will prevail, and that we will get to that. And so I've, to get to that gracious notion, there were a lot of F-bombs and bad words and cussing and yelling at myself and people around me. And there was a lot of ridiculous social networks energy that I was putting into that angst, that resistance to our desire to get to the other side of this. So faith, hope, and then the last thing is love.
Yeah, yeah.
I came in here wearing a mask.
Yeah.
And why? Because I love my brother. I love Andre. And, I tolerate the technician that's working. But I love Andre.
So yeah, the pandemic has definitely been interesting for musicians. I mean, I personally, 40 years of playing music full time, it's been, at first it was almost shocking to not be able to play live and not have that, speaking of connection with the audience.
Shocking is ridiculous. I mean, that's not even, it's like full on, it's like a bullet train going and then slamming shut.
Yeah.
It's like, it's worse than shocking. It's tragic. Like it was.
Did you do some streaming shows or some
Well,
performing?
the day it happened, because the death started happening and everything closed down, and I was, the denial started right at the exact same time, and I was like, I felt my heart broke.
Yeah.
For the people that were losing family members.
Yeah.
And I did a streaming, saying, because I had lost $20,000 worth of gigs, like in a heartbreak. And I don't normally bring that kind of money in my gigs as a performer. Speaking engagements, I'll make money doing that.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
As a violinist, I was going to perform with the Seattle Symphony. I was going to perform, some major functions.
Yeah,
And it was a really big deal for me. And then all of a sudden, and I felt like for the first time in my life, I have paid my dues, right? And I was going to be an overnight success. And then everything happened. It slammed shut, and it was a moment to look at history. I think that's really what that really helped me, was the ability to look back to the last pandemic.
Yeah.
And to see those old photos of people wearing masks.
Yeah.
Way back when.
Yeah.
And then remember that what followed that was the Roaring '20s. And it gave me hope to see that as a musician, I'm going to be sought after again, right? And this is my first thing, right? I mean, this is a...
Oh, just for like in-person thing?
Well, it's going to be a concert. Like it's going to be I mean, I'm presenting. I mean, we don't have audience members here, but this is the first time
out of your home.
Not out of my home.
Yeah. Well, it's going to take some time. Venues. Some venues have closed. A lot of restaurants that have music have closed. It's going to take some time for people to get comfortable gathering again, and I deal with a lot of theaters that don't want to start booking unless they can actually book a full theater, because they don't make money if they can't book a full theater. So they're not interested in 25% or 50%. So it's going to take. It's interesting for full-time musicians for sure.
Okay. So I've always wanted to ask you this. When I describe you to my friends, or if I'm going to play with you, and I've heard a lot of violin. I grew up in Italy and traveled, and there's another element to your sound that's not just a beautiful classical violin tone. And it's a mysterious thing. It's like almost like there's like a wind in your sound or something. And is it a technique? Is it something that you've cultivated when you were younger that's along with your classical technique? Or is it something else?
The wind sound you're speaking of?
Almost, yeah.
The wind is an objective of mine. I mean, the notion of playing the violin, most violinists, they rosin their bow to the point where it really sticks to the string and it wraps around the string in its own, the horsehair that's on there. What I like in that wind sound is I play, there's so many things, there's so many aspects of that. But one thing that my teacher, Arthur Thal, always said was, the violin is for people who can't sing, right? It was invented for people who can't sing. So what kind of singer are you going to be? And I always imagined someone who's lived a long life, right? I wanted it to be an old person's voice and someone who has that thing. So the beginning of the note and the end of the note is that consonant that's there. And so I imagine when I play, an elder whispering in my ear and creating that kind of intimacy for my listener, whether it's on the streets of Seattle or wherever, or it's in a recital hall or recording session.
Yeah,
I want it to capture a voice.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to hear me sing.
No, that's beautiful. I imagined it was something like that.
Yeah.
But I didn't know it was so intentional.
Oh, absolutely intentional.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about the intention of that is that it's really about the tension on the string. Like I can go. I can get into it too, if I need to.
Yeah.
But being it's a soft thing.
Yeah.
It's the difference between
It's kind
grabbing your arm or caressing your arm.
Right.
It's like how I want. I mean, the violin is so responsive to the touch that it's an important part of the whole composition process, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So you're letting the humanness and the physicality come into the music in a very organic way.
Yes.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you for clearing that up for me.
Yeah. It is. It's a beautiful intention, and I hear it in your playing too, like how your nails are done, like the attack.
Well, thank you. They're very nice tonight.
Yeah. But you put a lot of effort into it, right? I mean, I know you do.
Oh, the sound and the tone
exactly.
is like, it wouldn't be the same.
It wouldn't be the same
if I didn't put a lot of effort into how they're shaped and how the attack is and everything.
Right.
Yeah,
it isn't.
sure.
It's the same thing with the bow.
Yeah.
And now, I've never had a bow this nice.
Yeah.
This is an 1800s bow.
Wow. I should ask you about your violin because that's kind of what you do.
This is a new violin.
Yeah.
This is a Dorothy Smith violin. She studied in Cremona, Italy, where Strads were married, right?
And where is she from?
And she's in Bellingham.
Bellingham,
yeah.
okay.
So she took. I went up to an old growth forest up near Mount Baker and brought back the core of an old growth cedar tree.
Grabbed it from the inside.
I literally did. It had already fallen over, and I reached inside and I grabbed it. And it was a prayer. I mean, I grabbed and I put it in a plastic bag, and then she ground it up and to a fine pigment and worked it into clay from Oklahoma in honor of her story. So our stories came together in that way, and that's the stain.
Yeah. Okay.
So the clay, the pigment from the clay and the pigment from this old growth cedar tree are what give it this beautiful
is like 3
color.
or 4 years old, right?
It's 1 year old.
Okay.
It's not even broken in yet, and it sounds this good.
Yeah.
The wood is very old. Like they determined that no one computers in the 80s determined they would never ever be able to make a Stradivarius violin.
Yeah.
And Dorothy was like, well, challenge accepted. And she came back with suitcases full of what looked like firewood from my, in my eyes, but
Yeah.
it was really, violin wood.
Yeah, yeah.
And has been waiting, and she's now using that wood to make fine instruments again.
Yeah.
So Allegro Strings, Bellingham, Washington. Dorothy Smith is the luthier.
Yeah, yeah.
And she's amazing. She's always been, she's the only person that touches this instrument, like besides me.
Yeah, yeah.
She maintains it and adjusts it. And we've got some things to do on it still. We're going to adjust the height of the bridge to allow for some different action. And
Yeah, yeah.
and she knows my style.
Mm-hmm.
So she knows that I want that breath in
Right.
in the tone.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I play it. Right?
Yeah.
I play it that way.
So I have a question now. As we're going into the future, you do public speaking and storytelling. What are you still composing new songs on the violin? What's your balance with your violin music and your direction, your mission with speaking?
Yeah, I don't intentionally compose new music.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, I've never done that.
yeah,
I think that's one reason why I'd have a difficult relationship with a label.
yeah.
And why I've stayed independent is because the requirement to do that. It's been years since new music has come out of me.
Yeah.
There is a new piece that is coming out that I think is kind of neat. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know how it's going to end.
Yeah.
But I don't attach.
Yeah, but I want to interrupt you. You can emit music, improvising.
Yeah, improvising is fun.
And that's new music.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not. But as far as a composition, what is a composed piece, and where it's finished, like it starts here and it ends there. That's improv is, for me, is reactive. It's a lot like life, right? This conversation is an improv conversation. You ask me a question or I make a statement and I respond to that and it goes back and forth. And we do that musically lovely. I mean, I love doing that with you.
Lovely.
Like I lovely love you. And I'm reminded, and this is part of what I want. I have a coin here from 1894, right? So before the last pandemic.
Yeah, yeah.
After the signing of the treaty, 1855 treaty, which Native people were able to connect through a peace treaty with the non-Native people. And I just got this today, and this penny today is worth $51. I know that because the price is written right there, $51, right? And it just reminds me that when we signed the treaty, we gave up all the land, but we needed to keep our way of life, right? And this penny reminds me of what's really valuable. I mean, it's a penny. The penny is worth $51, but our way of life, how we choose to be present to one another, that is worth even more, right? And so I want to gift this to you, and I don't know how we're going to do this. Like, you might have to disinfect it somehow. I do have Clorox wipes, but we're good. We're okay. So I won't lick it before I give it to you. But I wanted to gift this to you because I believe that who you are and who you've always been as a musician, you didn't even know you were saving my life. You didn't know I was going through a depression that was so dark that it almost took my life. And yet who you are and your recognition and acknowledgement of the beauty that was coming out of me through my music and was extremely valuable to me. So this penny I'm giving to you as a remembrance of this moment where we're still being true to ourselves, being true to ourselves as artists, as men, as human beings on earth. I offer you this penny. I'll put it right here.
Thank you,
There
my
you
friend.
go.
I really appreciate it.
It is. It's yeah. And now, can I borrow a penny? You got $51 I can borrow.
Well, thank you for your gift. You know, as you have played many times on the Benaroya shows, I did for 20 years, and so many of my friends and our mutual friends have enjoyed your music and, you know, taken it home with them.
Yeah.
And I think what's our connection is it's we're the same age, and we're
both Scorpios.
we both write original music.
Yep.
And it's kind of hard to describe, but there's some connection in the spirit of the music because of those intersections, you know. So in parting here, and thank you for this, my friend. In parting here with the interview, is there something else you'd like to say in terms of what you have going for the future, or something that you would like to say to whoever's listening as a final word?
It's been an honor to be here, and that we've had this conversation. If the people are still watching it, I'm thankful. I'm thankful to all of you for being a part of this communication. Thank you for enduring whatever you endured, for overcoming, for being resilient, for seeing a way to be. And thank you, Andre, for giving me the hope that we're going to get to the other side of this. We're gonna have a wonderful time, and you know, hang in there, wear your masks, get the vaccine or not. Just enough of us, I hope we will, and we'll get to the other side of this. And I have hope. I have a lot of love for my audience, and I look forward to a hall where we can share fluids, right? And, you know, take part in communion again. And,
Yeah.
It'd be fun.
Definitely. Well, Swil Kanim, Richard Marshall, great Northwest violinist, storyteller. So stay tuned now. We will have a short concert and hopefully a story, and we get a chance to play together. So stay tuned for the next video. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Yeah.